Welcome to American History since 1877. Now, colleges kind of cherry pick when to divide American history. Part one, which is taught in the fall semester, with part two, which is typically taught in the spring semester. The consensus seems to be somewhere around Reconstruction, so some colleges will have American history since 1865. We at Illinois Central College have it since 1877, but this is the starting point anyway. Reconstruction, which ends at 18, which starts, at 1865. These videos, which I will make as regularly as I can, because these are going to be, I think, real labors of love, are meant to serve just as supplementary material. The meat and potatoes of the course should be coming from you reading your textbook, from participating in class activities, from reading handouts, watching the crash course videos, the worksheets of which I pass out in class. The reason really that I'm recording these at all is because our course is hybrid in nature and I'm only seeing you guys once a week, and it would be absolutely impossible for me to impart all the information I would need to impart to you with only one class meeting. So you get these lectures. But again, these are not comprehensive. This is very much scratching the surface of a rather large issue. We could probably do half a semester on Reconstruction and still have a lot more to say. But let's dive in. So, of course, there are a lot of problems with the new peace. We are left facing the issue of how to reintegrate the former Confederacy. We're dealing with the fates of former slaves, the readmission requirements for seceding states, and it wasn't quite clear in the aftermath of the Lincoln assassination who would be leading the efforts on Reconstruction, if it would be Congress or if it would be the president. Certainly, Andrew Johnson, President Lincoln's second vice president, handled things very differently than I imagine President Lincoln's first vice president, Hannibal Hamlin, would have. And probably, even though Lincoln was a Republican, he probably would have been at loggerheads a lot of the time with the radical Republican faction in the House of Representatives and Senate, led by Congressman Thaddeus Stevens. So it was confused, to say the least, about how this would end up. So the legal issues, we're looking at all these newly freed people. What do we do with them? Where do we send them? Do we owe them anything for holding them in bondage? And if so, what? We've passed now a 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. Should maybe a condition of readmission into the Union be acceptance of the abolition of the institution? And if so, what are we doing about the people in the Deep South who maybe, after Union troops left, kind of forced their former slaves back into servitude? What do we do about the unfair practices of sharecropping? A lot to consider. What should be done with and for free blacks? An organization called the Freedmen's Bureau was set up. I am rather partial to the Freedmen's Bureau. I think that if it was given more than half a chance, it probably would have been very successful. But unfortunately, it was not given the support it was due. These, if you're familiar with the saying "40 acres and a mule," That was the Freedmen's Bureau. So, how and when should the southern states be reintegrated? It was actually a rather lenient process. An oath to uphold the Constitution. Rebel leaders like Robert E. Lee had they excuse me, he was unable to vote. uh, Loyalty pledges, acceptance of the Constitution, but then we're also left with the question, well, if the people who revolted in the first place could disregard the Constitution, then what do we have to really ensure that they were going to keep their word the second time around? So, what should be done with Davis and other Confederate leaders? Lincoln wanted leniency. It wouldn't do any good, and I mean, this is still the general thinking today. I mean, to make martyrs out of people, to have somebody. This is Jefferson Davis, who's pictured in this sketch. It wouldn't have done any good to hang him, because then he'd become a focal point for whatever might have been left of the Confederate cause. He was paroled. He went and traveled and lived abroad for a time, and he came back, retired, and died in the southern United States. So who would lead the Reconstruction? Well, that really depended on who you asked. As I've mentioned, Andrew Johnson thought he should. Thaddeus Stevens and the Radical Republicans had a different vision. It was kind of tough to get together on that. And we're dealing with the fact that half of our country just had its economy destroyed because the institution of slavery was abolished. Crops weren't as bountiful. Farms, many were destroyed, many undermanned, because the labor force was no longer there. Southern cities were destroyed. I'm thinking specifically of General Sherman and Atlanta. Slaves were freed due to the Emancipation Proclamation. Southerners, though, some Southerners, though, definitely did remain defiant, at least a goodly portion of them. So, freedom or freedmen? So, all the land belongs to the Yankees now, and they're going to divide it out among the colored people, says a former slave. Again, the Freedmen's Bureau, which was instituted to help former slaves, was leading that effort. So the big picture here, the greatest failure of Reconstruction was the lack of economic and social intervention by the government on behalf of freed slaves, and as a result, political and legal rights for blacks were undermined for the next century. Yeah, we botched this in a big way. It could have been handled a whole lot differently. So freed blacks really faced a really confusing situation. As I said, many owners re-enslaved their slaves after the Union soldiers left whatever areas of the South they might have been inhabiting. White gangs, says a Nashville newspaper, are writing about whipping, maiming, and killing who do not obey the orders of their former masters. Reminiscent of, and we're going to see similar things happening when the Ku Klux Klan is established. So other planters resisted emancipation through legal means, arguing it must be a state or local decision, and this was a genuine argument at the time. Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation, was issued rather as a wartime measure. It was unknown how the courts would treat it or if the courts would even uphold it during peace, when peace resumed, as he knew it would. So, I mean, that was kind of the hurry behind the 13th Amendment, to make sure that the institution of slavery was abolished forever, Emancipation Proclamation or not. So some slaves remained loyal to owners. Others pillaged former owners' plantations, remaining loyal. I have no explanation for that, except maybe they just had nowhere else to go and didn't know what else could be done. Pillaging plantations, certainly another understandable reaction. I mean, this you have to understand was uncharted territory for the country. There was no right path here that was going to fix the mess that had been left to us by really the founding generation. I would encourage you to look at this in the slides. If you don't have access to the slides, pause it and read the entirety of the letter. It's entertaining, if nothing else, sad and entertaining. So eventually, even resistant owners gave up slavery, and thousands of blacks moved to find work elsewhere. So homesteads for free slaves. I have gone through the country, and on every side I was besieged with questions. How are we to get homesteads, to get lands? So Lincoln believed that 400 years of unrequited toil qualified freed slaves to what Thaddeus Stevens referred to as forfeited estates of the enemy. What the radical Republican faction and others had in mind was really to give land in the South that belonged to the people who owned these plantations and who participated in the institution of slavery to the newly freed slaves. And that was what they wanted to do. Now that obviously that didn't happen. It didn't last long enough. But they tried. So Sherman had reserved large coastal tracts of land for liberated slaves and settled them on 40-acre plots. So in October 1867, President Johnson ordered these lands restored to their white owners. They had it for a few years. Most former slaves became sharecroppers. So there was I can't emphasize enough just the lack of opportunity. There was nothing for them to do, really, other than go back to what they were doing, which was working the land. So working for plantation owners in exchange for a place to live. The picture you see here, I mean, if you can call this a place to live, it's just a sad state. I don't know what to say about it. So this is a map of sharecropping per county in the South. As you can see, I mean, it was happening literally in the entirety of the former Confederacy. The church became the focus of the black community following the war. Political meetings were held there, just community meetings in general, church services. It was an important focal point for the African American community to have a place like that. It was a real gathering point, a real focal point for them. Emancipation also meant that African Americans could be educated formally now, but they faced serious discrimination for the next century, and even longer than that, I would say. We're still fighting a lot of the same battles. We don't seem to learn from our history. No matter how many classes we offer in it, how much we hammer it into the heads of generation after generation, the same old battles. I've heard a saying once, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And I think that's true. We see a lot of the same things, just kind of in different forms. So in March 1865, the Freedmen's Bureau was set up to help unskilled and uneducated blacks to find work, to mediate disputes, as I said. And they were led by Union General Oliver O. Howard. And this was really also a passion project of Secretary of War Edwin Stanton as well. It was really an Army thing. The Army led it, the Army enforced it, because really who else would? And the Bureau, was really very successful. They taught 200,000 African Americans how to read. The Bureau was not as effective as it could have been. I contend that it wasn't allowed to be as effective as it could have been, but that I just explicitly state as an opinion. It expired in 1872 under criticism from racist white people. African Americans began organizing themselves politically. Most, if not all of them, really were supporting the party of Lincoln, the Republican Party. And they held state and federal political offices, but not after Reconstruction. And these are two of the gentlemen, Blanche Bruce and Hiram Revels. Revels and Bruce served as senators from Mississippi. The colored men who took their seats in both Senate and House were, as a rule, studious, earnest, ambitious men whose public conduct would be honorable to any race, says a Republican congressman. African Americans, they remained very loyal to the Republican Party, again called the Party of Lincoln, still is today, for the next century. They were pretty much a dependable voting bloc for the Republicans. Now, there is the platform switch, which you can read about in really any political science textbook you could get your hands on, from, maybe the 1920s, 30s to the 1960s, 70s-ish, where the Democratic platform and the Republican platform switched, and the Democrats became the Republicans, and the Republicans became the Democrats, and then the South starts voting Democrat en masse. That's just a little tangent, though. So the Union League was a political club for African Americans that educated members of civil duties, supported the Republican Party. They built churches and schools, and they defended members in courts. They recruited militias. They were a positive force in the African American community. The black were really a very restrictive, racist set of laws passed by Southerners in the legislatures, of course, to control freed blacks in 1865-66, really immediately after the war, to force, to restrict African Americans and to force them back into labor-intensive, slave-like conditions. Their purpose was to maintain a really very inexpensive, submissive labor force for the former slaveholders. They established vagrancy laws. So any black person without a yearly labor contract could be arrested, fined, and forced into involuntary servitude. They prohibited intermarriage, so marriage between races, testifying against white people and owning firearms in many areas. Also, black men were prohibited from serving on juries where white people were on trial. Local authorities were allowed to seize black children from their parents for unpaid labor. Mississippi and South Carolina passed these black codes first. These were really the most infamous ones, and these codes out and out ignored the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery and really led the Congress to passing the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th Amendment, which temporarily nullified these codes. So that was what that was. And again, if you don't have access to the slides, I would pause the video here and just read this. So blacks who quit their jobs were subject to fines, and wages were kept outrageously low in most cases, if there were wages. Forbade blacks from serving on jury duty, or white people were involved explicitly, from renting land. They sent unemployed blacks to work on chain gangs. And it undermined the whole idea of emancipation, of freedom. Some wondered, I mean, if the Civil War had really been worth it, if it was just going to result in African Americans being really essentially right back where they started before the attack on Fort Sumter by the Confederacy. So then we come to the Ku Klux Klan. So the KKK sought to weaken political freedoms of blacks through the use of terror. Southern whites hated scalawags. Southerners accused of plundering Southern treasuries during Reconstruction. James Longstreet and Joseph Brown are two examples of people who would be labeled as scalawags. If you simply Google James Longstreet and scalawag, you can learn all about it, and I encourage you to do so. Southern whites hated carpetbaggers, who are defined as Northerners seeking power and wealth in the war-torn South. So somebody, say, from Illinois who would move down to Kentucky or Mississippi, set up shop and get rich. Maybe run for office, become mayor of a town, something like that. And, yeah, that was what the Klan said would happen to carpetbaggers. So the Klan is founded in 1866 by extremely racist white people, called the Invisible Army of the South, otherwise known as the Ku Klux Klan, which is still around today. And their aim was, one of their aims anyway, was to scare black people into not voting for figures for public office or from seeking jobs. They use violence to keep people down, in addition to terrorizing communities in order to achieve their aims. And again, if you don't have access to the slide, pause the video and read this. This is really what the Klan was. The Klan was a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party, the planter class, and all those who desired restoration of white supremacy. That, in a nutshell, is the Ku Klux Klan. So this illegal group undermined much of what abolitionists sought to do. And we will pick up here in part 2.